Hi everyone, I hope you had a wonderful winter break. I had a nice amount of time off. I got to relax, got to see my family, which I haven't seen in about 2 years since the pandemic started. And ate a lot of food, didn't do very much, and got some time away from the game, which is very nice, much needed. January was a bit of a short month in terms of work because of the winter break. I think it was about 2 weeks off in January as well, to make up for the amount of time that I've not had off in the last couple of years. And so, not the largest amount of stuff got done. However, January was the point where I began working on what I'm calling the narrative update. The narrative update is essentially me taking the whole beginning of the game and how it all works, all the tutorials, how we basically do progression and things like that at the start of the game, ripping out all the old stuff, and then replacing it with a whole new introduction, basically. Those of you who have played the beginning of the game will know that it's kind of short. It's not super great, to be honest, and it doesn't do a very good job of teaching the player how to play the game, introducing concepts, things like that. Like, there's no real tutorials and things to kind of guide the player through. So I've taken the feedback, and I was also very aware of this, and have started working into redoing all of that. Part of this means that I have rewritten a lot of the dialogue. Things are a lot slower paced now, so in the old or the current version, you get things unlocked very quickly, you're kind of left to your own devices very quick. There's no real introduction, it's just like, off you go, now you've got access to everything, go, and it feels a little bit weird, and there is definitely a lot of confusion about how things work. So a big goal of doing the rework of the narrative and all this stuff is to make sure that things go a little bit slower, things unlock at a nice pace, and also that there is a good amount of tutorials essentially that happen that go, okay, this is how you do this thing, this is how the design tool works. I know the design tool is a very big thing and it's a very daunting concept for players as soon as they get started with it. So I wanted to also break that down into sort of smaller chunks, and bit by bit, through helping out villagers, you unlock more and more of the design tool, and each stage of that unlock process, you get a nice tutorial that says, okay, this is how you do this part, this is how you do this part, and over time you learn how it works, instead of being essentially thrown into the design tool with no introduction, no information, no tutorial, and just told to make stuff, which I know is very overwhelming, and I've seen a lot of players kind of struggling with that. Implementing the narrative update has meant essentially me starting the game and going, okay, what's going to happen at this point? Okay, we need to have a tutorial here, or we need to have a cutscene here. Okay, we don't have a system for doing cutscenes yet in the way that I want, so I need to build that. So I built a cutscene system for that stuff. Okay, we don't really have any way of doing nice little tutorial pop-ups. I'll build that as well. So I've slowly, through January, essentially started a new game and looked at the flowchart that we put together, which I think I showed you in the previous update. Looked at that flowchart and went, okay, stage 1, do this, okay, build those systems, next part, stage 2. And as I worked through that, it meant that I had the systems in place to then, when I was doing cutscenes further down the line and the narrative stuff, all that system was already there and I could just tweak it. So the beginning of the month was spent mostly getting all of those systems together and getting everything working. And then the remainder was me, like I say, going through that flowchart and implementing the dialogue. Everything initially in a sort of a placeholder setup, so none of the proper dialogue, none of the proper assets, so that all of the flow was working. And then once I got all that going and that was all functioning properly, I then spent the last week or so getting started with writing all the dialogue, and that's sort of moved into February as well. And I must say, writing all the dialogue has been very, very tiring and very, very daunting because of the nature of the game and the fact that there are multiple personality types. It's meant that every little quest thing that you get, every request that you get from the villagers at the beginning, which unlock parts of the game, I needed to write each of those dialogues. We have 6 personality types, so I had to write each of those dialogues 6 times. So you can imagine my brain got quite mushy, a little bit sort of tired from essentially writing the same dialogue, asking for you to paint a picnic bench, for example, and do other bits and pieces. So I honestly can say that wasn't. It was sort of fun in itself, but after just spending, I think it ended up being a sort of week and a half, 2 weeks of just sitting in a text editor writing dialogue, I got very tired. But I'm happy to say that that all got done, and that was all sort of ready to be sent off to localization. So that gets sent off to another company, all of the text that I've written, and they then translate it into all of the languages that the game is in. That's pretty much it in terms of what got done in January. Like I say, it was a shorter month. I thought I would quickly show you now, and this is something I've shown to some of the other patrons, is just a quick run through of how the dialogue and quest stuff works, and give you a little bit more of a behind the scenes there, so you get an idea of how I essentially write the dialogue, how that gets implemented into the game, and a rough run through of how the quest stuff works. So let's take a look at that. To give you a quick demonstration of both the quest things that I have in the project and the conversation stuff, I thought I'd just do a very simple quest, very simple conversation with Owen here. Quests are essentially a thing that tracks progress, and based on whether or not you've done certain things, you can move on to the next stage of the quest. And this is what I've been using for doing the main game intro, for example. You'll be given tasks, and then as you do those tasks, you can move on to the next bit. And both the quest system and the dialogue system are very closely linked. So dialogue will be displayed based on whether or not quests are at certain stages, things like that. So let's get started and do some dialogue stuff for Owen, and then we'll do a very, very simple quest thing just to demonstrate how that works. So Owen's sitting there. Let's set up a initial bit of conversation for him. So in here, this is basically an empty text file, and all of the conversation stuff that I'm doing is done in text files at the moment. I want to build an interface for it, but it's a lot easier to just do it all in text. So let's get set up. You can see here at the top, there's a line that says pack villager 03. That basically says that this dialogue belongs to villager 03, and that's changes based on what villager and also what personality type the dialogue relates to. So let's just get started by putting together a simple hello. So the dialogue is basically broken into points, and these points link to one another, and they also have certain properties and text and things like that. So I've created a little point here. It's kind of a sort of slightly a little bit like code, like programming, but also a bit kind of looser. And we're going to say that this point is unique, which means it's going to override anything else. So any random dialogue that might come up, we want this to show instead. Now that we know that it's going to be the one that shows, we can then just add some text to it. Going back into the editor, I can refresh the dialogue. If I go up to Owen and talk to him, you'll see now he displays the dialogue that we just written. So that's essentially how the dialogue stuff works. Obviously there's a lot more complicated stuff you can do with it. I'll just quickly show you how, if we wanted to have responses, how we do that stuff. So let's add 2 responses to this dialogue point. You'll see here I've written choice. This essentially says what text will be displayed on the button when you get presented with these dialogue choices. We set up the first response. To connect that to our very first dialogue point, we can go up to it, and then we will add a new line. And you'll see here this one starts with 2, and it says that this dialog point can go to this response. I've had another response too, so I can just show you how this works with more than one response. If I go up here, I can then separate this out and add that onto the list of responses that it will display. Back in Unity, I will then refresh the dialog. And if we speak to Owen again, we'll see we'll get the first dialog, and then we've got these 2 points that we've just added. Clicking those, we'll just move on to the next point that we've written. That's sort of a very simple look at how the dialog stuff works. This is what I've been doing a lot of this week, is basically just putting in placeholder stuff for that. Now, looking at the quest things, you will see on the left-hand side, I have a thing called demo quest selected. That's basically what I'm using for this demonstration. Now in here, and again, this is something I'd love to build a nice editor for, but in here you will see we have just some basic information on the quest, and these stages, there's no stages right now, so we can add a quest stage. So you can see it's very daunting, and you can understand why I want to put a nice interface for this, but these quest stages allow us to do a whole bunch of different things. So you'll see initially in the top thing here we have, for example, objects that are required. If the quest requires that you have an object in your backpack, we have that here. Similarly, maybe you need the ingredients for something, for crafting something, so we can check for that. We can check to see if you've got any kind of beds or different types of objects in your backpack. And there are other things like settings. If you're wearing stuff, we can check stats and all of that. And also we can check the progress of other quests. Alongside this, we then, if all of those requirements are met, then we can then go on to completed actions, and this does things like you can give objects. So we can take objects from the player, we can give objects to the player. We can give objects based on what season it is. This is used in, for example, the farming. When you get the initial bunch of seeds, it will go based on what season that you are currently in, so it gives you seeds that you can grow. And it can do things like change settings, and these settings are things that we keep track of in the game, not like resolution and video settings. And then we can unlock things, and we can also relog stuff and trigger cutscenes and narrative events and things like that. So it's a little bit overwhelming. Once you know everything that's in there, it's not too bad. So what we can do is, let's just, I don't know, we won't have any requirements for this quest, but what we'll do is we'll do some completed actions. So let's say that when, for example, this quest completes, or this quest stage completes, we will give the player something. So what should we give them? Let's give the player let's give them the balloon. So I hook up the balloon there, and we want to say that we want to give them one of those when this quest stage completes. So now we've got that set up, we need some way of interacting with this, and this is usually done through the conversation stuff. So if I hop back into the file for the conversation we set up with Owen, so we're back in here, what I will do is I'm going to add a new response, and that response is going to complete that quest stage. So you'll see here, similar to the others, I set it up, I've given a choice, so that will be the text that shows up when you select that dialogue. But the new line underneath there, which you'll see starts with action, you can have actions attached to conversations, to dialogue points. And in this instance, we're saying that we want an action, it's going to be related to a quest. it's going to be the quest called Demo Quest, and what we want to happen is we want it to complete that stage. So we'll complete the stage, and then it will move on to the next one. We've got a little bit of text underneath there. Last thing is I just need to hook this up into the first dialog point. Now that's done, I should be able to refresh the dialog in Unity. Hopefully, now if we speak to Owen, we will be able to complete that quest and get to the balloon. We've got the new response there. And, might have just missed it, but on the right hand side, you can see that we got the balloon. There we go. So yeah, if you look on the right here as well, you can see that now the current stage for this quest is at stage 1, so we've completed the first stage. So that's kind of it really. It's a very, very basic run through of how this stuff works, but this is essentially how I've been going through and setting up all the intro and other bits and pieces for the start of the game and how progression works and how things unlock.